This is Beyond the Culture. Let's go. I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David Walker. I have an outstanding show for you today. I'm going to be talking to a very distinguished gentleman by the name of Peter Carter. Let me introduce Peter for you. Peter is a longtime educator in both the state of New York and the state of New Jersey. Not only that, but he is a recent author of his first book called A Black First. And in that book, Peter chronicles his life, his experiences, his journey through many challenges. He talks about having to overcome many obstacles, racism and prejudices. And we find that he became very successful in his life. And we want to have a conversation with Peter today. And so I want to welcome to the show, Mr. Peter Carter. Welcome, Peter.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It is my pleasure having you today on the show. I heard about your journey, your experiences, and I said I have to have Peter on the show. And we're just going to have a conversation today. We're going to talk about your book. And of course, I'm going to give the title out again. It's called A Black First, and it chronicles your life. And so many of the questions that I ask you today will come right out of your story. But before we get into conversations about you, I want to start off by asking you this question. Since you wrote a book called A Black First, I want to ask you your thoughts on the nomination of Senator Kamala Harris, who was the first Black woman to be nominated for the national presidential ticket. You were a Black first, and she's going to be a Black first. So what are your thoughts on Senator Kamala Harris?
I could not be more overjoyed. Number one, I'm the dad of a Black woman.
All right.
And who has been successful also. And the fact that Joe Biden, whom I happen to have known years ago when he was a senator in the state of Delaware, chose the person who attacked him during the debate as his running mate, says a lot about Joe Biden as a human being. I think that's crucial. And Senator Harris, I mean, she is just very, very talented, very, very bright. I was proud of her when I saw her in several of the hearings, including the impeachment, that this woman, this prosecutor, this attorney is something else that I look forward to her serving as the vice president of the United States. And I'm going to go a step further, Doc, and as president of the United States.
All right. Absolutely. She's getting herself prepared, and she's going to be ready, and she is ready.
She's ready. No, she's ready.
So,
I mean, going down, I'm speaking now. That'll go down in history.
Yes, she will. So let's I want you to take us back to your beginnings. Tell us where you were born, where did you grow up, and what was that experience like?
Well, I was born in Trinidad, West Indies.
Okay.
And came over here at the age of 2 on Pan American Airways, which no longer exists. And what was interesting is I remember being 2. I don't remember being 52, but I remember being 2. And my mother was an educator in her own way. She believed it, which I came to believe later on, that the best person to teach a child to read is his mother or father, I guess, because it's the only pupil that he or she would have. So the minute I could talk, I suspect, she made sure I was reading. And there was this British primer, because Trinidad back in 1944, 45, 46, was a British colony. And so there was this British primer she taught me to read from, a small thing. And I was reading on the airplane coming over. And we were the only people of color on the airplane, of course. And these white folks, ladies only, were giving me, through my mother, currency because I could read. They found this to be absolutely amazing. And as I became older and understood what America was all about, I realized why they found that amazing. Mm-hmm. No little colored child should be able to do that. And that was my introduction to America, that whatever it is I was doing was so unique. It wasn't unique to me. It wasn't unique for my mother. We can read. And so it started with that. Into Harlem in Manhattan, to my grandmother's, about a 7-bedroom apartment. My grandmother, back in 1940s, was a businesswoman.
Okay.
A good businesswoman. Her profession was a midwife. She delivered babies, but she delivered almost everything. And black women walking the streets of Harlem in the late 1940s, at all hours of day and night. Nothing ever happened to her. She was never mugged, never accosted. The men in the street tipped their hats to her, helped her with her packages. She was an amazing woman. She was also a very mean woman, but that's neither here nor there. As I look back at it, clearly she had to be that way to survive in Harlem. Mm-hmm. She had tenants, 2 or 3 lodgers, she called them, who came down to her room and paid their rent religiously every week, or whatever it is she charged them. But she was a businesswoman.
Okay.
And was involved, I suspect, in many enterprises, some of which I guess probably weren't even legal. Mm-hmm. But Harlem in the 1940s, for a single black woman, that must have been quite a challenge for her.
Can I go back to Harlem?
Yes, sure.
So obviously you said you were in Harlem during the 40s.
Yes.
And
the late 40s.
The late 40s. And of course, many people have heard of the greatness of Harlem, the history of Harlem. Did you meet any black celebrities when you were in Harlem, like a Duke Ellington, a James Baldwin?
They performed on 125th Street. I lived on 118th Street, and the farthest I was allowed to do was to walk to school, which was at 153rd Street, because we had already moved. Mm-hmm. I spent, I guess, age 2, 3, 4, and 5, roughly, sir, at 118th Street, though I met none of the celebrities who performed uptown.
Okay.
So we lived at 118th Street. 125th Street was considered uptown.
Got you. All right. So
I was in the hood.
Okay, that's cool. Listen, we all came from the hood. So, and guess what? In spite of the fact that you came from the hood, you grew up to become an educator.
Yes, sir.
What was that experience like, actually instructing and educating the minds of young people?
That's a beautiful thing. Not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a calling. I really do. I think it's a calling. Like something like that. What that is like is that it's an awesome responsibility to share with children of all ages information that they would not have otherwise obtained if you weren't there.
Mm.
And how you share that information is very important, because I realized, and so did they, that they didn't really want the information.
Right.
All right. Most children in school are in school for a variety of reasons, one of which might be academic, but there are lots of other things happening in schools which are not academic. So I took that responsibility seriously. And at the end of each day, I would say to myself, and then later on I would say to my staff when I became an administrator, which kid is better off today for my having been there? And if I couldn't call a kid by name, that means I didn't have a good day.
Okay.
Because I didn't get through. So with an awesome responsibility to impart knowledge. I don't care what the knowledge was. All right. It may have been the subject matter. I taught, among other things, high school English. I taught high school English to kids in Brooklyn. So that's teaching a second language. All right. I also taught Latin, a foreign language. But
okay.
I mostly taught human beings about something because we always didn't stick with the curriculum. Things came up. Presidents got murdered. Black leaders got murdered. Things were happening. And we talked about that also. I tried to get a couple of apartments. I mentioned in the book. And when I showed up to the superintendent of the building and he saw what I looked like, because on the phone, it was and still is difficult to tell what I look like. Then the tables turned, the apartment was just rented, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then I went back to where at the time I was teaching a bunch of white kids. But again, you don't let that stuff really bother you and get to you. And you learn a lot about humanity. But teaching children, Doc, is really, really a calling. And I took it very, very seriously.
Absolutely. And it is a calling, as I know, as you know, because you're right. Everyone can't do it.
No.
You know, because the reward is definitely not in the pay.
Nope.
And if you don't get reward from educating minds, then you're just not going to get a reward because the pay is not the reward you deserve, you know? But so you're an educator. And throughout your journey, you've experienced, as I read in your book, a lot of racism. You know that subject, you know, all too well. I want you to take us back to your earliest recollection of experience racism and being othered. How far back can you go?
I love that, sir. Well, one of the pronounced remembrances is when my mother went down to Rector Street to the courthouse to be sworn in as a naturalized American citizen. And she took me with her. She took me everywhere.
Okay.
She was going to go into the courthouse with, you know, several other people to be sworn in as an American. And the, I guess, a security guard person said, he can't go in there with you. Oh, okay. However, 30 seconds after that, a white kid went in with his parents. Well, my mother wasn't going to have that. That just wasn't going to occur. And she made some noise about it, a lot of noise about it, right there in the corridors of this courthouse in downtown Manhattan, which resulted in my going in to the room for the swearing in process, after which we went to the judge's quarters, and the judge said it was good for me to be there. So that's my first and vivid recollection. All men might be created equal, but all men certainly aren't, haven't been, and sadly shall not be treated equal.
Yes.
And I guess I may have been seven-ish at that time, and learned, oh, is this the way it works? And that was my vivid experience of being othered, as you put it, Doc. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And we moved on. The other example, which I alluded to earlier, was when I was in school in Brooklyn. It was also a parochial school, wherein I was number one academically. That's just what it was, you know, period. But there were times, various grades, where one of the white kids, who was number two, or maybe number three even, was purported to be first in the class because of it happened to be a boy, because of his whiteness, and also because of the fact that his parents were able to contribute to the support of the school much better than my mother, who was on public assistance, could. So I learned there at 11, 12 years old, I guess, that not only is it special in the weird sense of the word to be white, it's funny too. So in the back of my mind, as a young boy, that my ultimate goal, I didn't want to be white. That would have been annoying. But I wanted to have money.
Right.
And I was fortunate at the end of it all for that to happen. Because I ended my career as a superintendent of schools in a upper middle class Caucasian school district. You talk about college educated white women.
Mm-hmm.
That's who was in charge of the school superintendent at the end of my career, and they were very good to me.
Okay.
Including giving me a Rolex watch upon my departure. But Doc, being othered is a really interesting thing, and I guess I do want to share that as we are all othered, the trick is not to let it get inside your head. If it gets inside your head and you react to it properly, you will continue to be othered, but not gain any more goals because the white world will be either afraid of you, shun you, or put their knee on your neck. All right? And that's very tricky too, to avoid having somebody's knee on your neck. And you learn how to do that by being careful.
Sure.
If I may just tell you a quick story of when I lived in the projects in Brooklyn. Every summer, one of us died, either by falling out of a 13 or 14-story window.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of my playmates lying on the grass and being covered over with a sheet who had fallen out of a window. Or being hit by a car.
Okay.
As you cross the street to go to the candy store. Or drowning in a thing called the Gowanus Canal.
Yes.
But not too many of us drowned in the canal. The canal was reserved for members of organized crime who were disobedient. So I learned a lot about organized crime growing up also, because once a summer, they pulled somebody out of the canal because he had obviously disobeyed the rules of the organization.
Okay.
And then I also witnessed, as a kid, an actual police car chase where the members of the New York Police Department were shooting out of their car windows at a car they were pursuing, causing us to all have to duck for cover because they didn't care that there were these black kids playing on the sidewalk, shooting their guns at some kind of a perk. So you learn a lot being othered, because that's certainly a sign of being othered, because I'm saying right now that if it were a white neighborhood, those cops would not have had their guns out shooting with white kids playing. So I survived all of that.
Wow.
I survived taking the New York City subways to and from school. I survived being stopped twice. I only put it once in the book by the police in the evening who were making a sweep and having two of the policemen have their guns out. That was close. That was close. I was about 15 or 16 then. So that really let me know clearly, Doc, what an endangered species I was.
Right.
That, hey, I could have died that night. What saved me? My mouth. I was able to articulate myself out of being shot by the New York City Police Department. Someone once asked me, well, how'd you know they're going to shoot you? I said, well, if the guy had his gun out, there's only one thing that comes after that. So, he wasn't kidding around. He could have just talked. There were four of them and one of me. So you didn't need to have your gun out unless you were going to shoot me. So I escaped that unpleasant situation. Other examples of being othered were stops on the highway, and I'll tell us one quick story. One of the jobs I had was a high-ranking official in the state of New Jersey. I was a county superintendent, which is tantamount to being an assistant commissioner of education. And I was given a company car which had governmental plates, and I was driving down a major thoroughfare at 5:30 in the afternoon, heavy traffic. So you were going at between 15 and 20 miles an hour, and I saw the proverbial lights behind me. I pulled over. This young officer pulled me over. Keep in mind now, everybody, I had official government plates on an official government car. Mm. And I looked at him and I said, you know, officer, when this is all over, you are going to be very embarrassed. So I said, no, here are my credentials, but tell me, why did you pull me over? Young kid. He was about 24, 25 years old. I was in my 50s. He said, well, you were driving erratically, sir. I said, if I were driving erratically on this very congested highway, I would have hit something. Mm-hmm. He also called for backup, I guess, to protect him. Long story short, when the encounter ended, I mentioned a couple of things to him as to the name of the academy where he attended police school and who it was named after. And I said, you know, I know the gentleman after whom that academy was named. I said, you know, you've been rather polite. So when I call your police chief in the morning, I will mention that you were polite. And he said, you're going to call my police chief? I said, absolutely. And I called the chief in the morning. I got all these apologies. Oh, Mr. Carter, we're so sorry. And I said, you got to retrain your men. You can't be pulling over people because they're black.
Right.
All right. I said, if it weren't me and it was just a regular black guy, that would not have ended well. I said, that encounter would not have ended well with somebody else. And so I was certainly on that occasion. Again, fortunately, my mouth and my intelligence got me out of that.
Wow. I mean, that is that's truly an enlightening experience. And while you were talking, you said something, and it really is leading me into my next question, because you said when you called up the police commission or the captain or whoever you spoke to the next day on the phone,
yes,
you said, if I had been, I don't know if you said a black guy or another black guy. What did you say exactly?
I said if I had been another black male.
Another black male. Well. But when you said that, my next question is, when I was reading your book, I noticed these three references to black people, and I'll say them, and then I want you to talk about them. I saw the term African American, I saw the term black, then I saw Negro, and then colored man. And I would assume someone of your age would have experienced all of those terms to describe you. Would you agree to that? And
that's why I use them. That's why I use them all.
Well, tell us about that, because that's so intriguing that we have gone through all of these different names and terminologies to identify us.
Well, we actually started with nigger.
I didn't write that one down. I'm sorry, but you're absolutely
right. I didn't
right.
put that in the book. I refuse to use that word.
I agree with you. Go ahead.
I would not use that word in the book. But that's where we started. And then to make that not sound as bad, then it became colored.
Sure.
All right. And then my intellect said, well, what color is that? Mm-hmm. All right. And then from color to Negro, from Negro to African American, from African American to black, and we seem to be holding at black now. Mm-hmm. I believe, again, my opinion, because we as a people are more in charge of our vocabulary, because all those other names were given to us by the white guy. Mm-hmm. All right, including African American, mm-hmm. To make it kind of sound better. So we're holding now at black, and we'll see what the next reiteration is. My children will be around to see what adjective will be utilized for us.
You use the word black.
Monster, which is used for Senator Harris. That's kind of interesting there too. That's just an aside.
Yes, that's just an aside. You're absolutely right. You know, oh God, let's not go there.
No, I'm sorry. Carter. I apologize.
Okay. But you did. So you said black. So let me just throw out this word: Black Lives Matter.
They sure do.
Talk about that for me.
I wrote one of the other things I do to keep me out of trouble is I write a commentary of the paper here. And I guess I've done 10 of them over the last 4 years. And the third, for the last one I wrote was entitled Black Lives Matter. And I ended by saying, my life matters.
Okay.
I matter. Mm-hmm. And that means we should be given the same respect as you all give one another.
Okay.
The word matter means respect, right? Just respect us as human beings, mm-hmm. And realize we're as good as, in some cases better, than you are. Going back to my 2-year-old experience on the plane, we can read.
Right.
Okay. We're not a bunch of dumb people just running around here on welfare making babies. All right? Mm-hmm. And if you looked at us in that manner, these things wouldn't happen. Right. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what goes into the making of people who enforce the law, no matter what color they may be. I don't know what goes into making people treat other people just because of what they look like as less than. I don't know what causes you to do that, mm-hmm. other than that you need to promote yourself as being more than.
Right.
But, Black Lives Matter movement, for which I commend all of those involved in that. And, we back in the day when we were trying to make ourselves know that we are something more than people have said we are, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, Mr. James Brown.
That's right.
We had all these things to build ourselves up, and in working with my young brothers and sisters in the inner city schools, I worked at a town called Irvington, New Jersey. And I tried my darndest as superintendent and later as a superintendent to make those young men especially, and the young ladies, know that there's something about them that's important, that they matter to themselves and need to behave in that way, Doc. Mm-hmm. Because many of them just didn't behave the way you and I know they could behave, and I told them that. All right, mm-hmm. We're going to behave properly. We're not going to be looking at the inside band of your underwear, male or female, as you walk through the school. It's mm-hmm. none of my business. It's none of your friend's business, and we will not have that. Mm-hmm. Mr. Carter's school, you can't do that.
Right.
And they didn't. All right, and we gave them some means to be proud of themselves. That, hey, Mr. Carter, there ain't no jobs for us out there. I said, well, if you go bopping around high, no, I'm not going to hire your ass.
Yes.
If you learn a little something that we're trying to teach you here, get your diploma. I will help you get yourself a little job and move along the continuum. Then the kids would tell me, oh, you didn't have it as bad as we did. I said, sit down. Let me tell you about my childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there was, you went through that? How'd you get here?
Uh-huh.
I said, I went to school. Just that simple. I went to school and I learned it, and I learned what the white man learned. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I became really dangerous. I now know as much as the white guy knows.
That's right.
And that makes you one dangerous Negro.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want you to do. I want you to learn and know as much as anyone else does. And the doors may shut in front of you, but they're not going to close all the way. And once there's a little opening, just push that door and walk in. And so that was all, hopefully, part of my give to my younger brothers and sisters who were coming after me. So I had the good fortune of working in our urban school districts in New Jersey and in our rich suburban school districts in New Jersey. And what I gave the suburban kids was that they saw firsthand a black man in charge. Mm-hmm. I think that was good for them. Not just a white guy can be in charge of it, a black guy can be in charge of it and do an outstanding job at the same time. So that was part of. And the two districts where I was superintendent, sadly, when I left those districts, they never hired another black guy or woman. I don't know why. It may have been because they couldn't handle the Peter Carter arrogance all over again, but they just never did.
Oh man. So let me ask you this. I know, being someone who've experienced the 1960s, the racial challenges of 50s and 60s, but I want to talk about the protests. How would you compare the protests that are taking today compared to the protests from back in the 60s?
Well, the protests from back in the 60s were only black people, except for the March on Washington, into which we interspersed movie stars. But the protests back in the 60s were just for, the basic right to vote,
right?
The right to go to McDonald's, very, very basic things. The current protest, which awakened white America to say, oh my God, do we treat other people that badly? We put our knees on people's necks. We break into their homes and shoot them. I never realized, these are the younger people,
right,
that we treated people like that. You can't treat, and they said to themselves, you can't treat people that way because the guy down the hall from me at college was black, and we didn't treat him that way.
Right.
We're going out in the street, and we're going to let America know that we detest and protest this kind of treatment of our fellow Americans. Back in the 60s, other than Lyndon Baines Johnson, we Negroes were not their fellow Americans.
That's right.
All right? And that's a big difference.
Sure.
And I am proud and moved to see what happened in 50 cities throughout this nation, day after day, night after night, thousands of black and white human beings walking together in protest, kneeling together. Speaking of which, Colin Kaepernick was only 4 years ago, knelt, and it was a national tragedy.
Right.
LeBron James knelt, and it's an example. We're getting there. We are getting there. So the distinction I'm saying is that white America of a certain age woke up and said, we are going to show our parents and grandparents that we just don't like this. And we did not realize and know this is the way that blacks are treated for perhaps having a counterfeit $20 bill.
Yes, yes. Are you a proponent of reparations?
Well, because I'm so arrogant, David, I don't want you to give me anything.
Right, right.
All right, so I'm not proponent of reparations because I don't want you to give me a damn thing. All right,
gotcha.
I can earn
sure,
it, and
sure.
and you better give it to me when I earn it. Okay?
Right, right.
Just because my ancestors were enslaved, gets very, very tricky for me
Sure.
because, I think about those African chieftains who were businessmen and sold our ancestors to the white men for the purpose of economics and taking cotton and taking care of plantations. We did not come over on those slave ships by ourselves. In other words, it wasn't the fact that all of a sudden a bunch of us said, let us lie down back to back in the bottom of a ship in feces and urine and come over to the New World. Right? Someone did that to us, and it was our own leadership that did that to us for the sake of money. If you search through everything, there's money somewhere behind it. So, yes, we were all treated terribly by people named Jefferson and Hamilton and Adams.
Yes.
And Washington and others of historic names. But whether or not 21st century America owes me a check, I'm not so sure about
that. Who would you say is who is the one person who has been the most influential to you, and why?
My mother.
Okay, tell me why.
She was a single Negro woman on welfare living in a low-income housing project.
Okay.
And she made sure that her son, A, was not going to be an adult in that housing project and was going to be a human being of knowledge. She made sure I did my homework every night. She made sure that I went to as good a school as possible, to have a scholarship school. And she made sure, Doc, that I was obedient.
Wow.
My mother's hand was fast. Her use of the belt was faster. And yes, thank goodness for that, because of the environment which I lived. The girls were getting pregnant, the boys were getting arrested.
Sure.
All right. And my mother, strong West Indian woman, born in Trinidad, took no stuff, and definitely none from her son. She had the phrase which many of the parents then had: I brought you into this world, and I'll take you out if I have to. And she meant it, though. You see, the woman wasn't kidding.
Sure.
All right, because when I looked at her beating for a simple thing, all right? For example, if she said something,
right,
the sky is orange, for example. If I dare said, Mom, the sky is blue, can't do that. You can't contradict me, because I'm in charge here. If the sky is yellow, it's yellow to you, son. And if you want it to be blue, there's pain involved in that. So the question, and may she rest in peace. She left us. I was 21 years old when she died. And she is, and she told me that when I was younger, and I guess getting those beatings, she would say, you will say when you become a man, you will thank me for this. As I was there yelling, because it was painful, Doc. I'm saying to myself, like hell, I'll thank you for this. And absolutely, my mother, Bernice Mildred Camilla, was the key to my success. As I hope maybe I'm the key to the success of my two children. But I didn't do it in the painful manner that my mother did.
Pete, as we bring this conversation to a close, and it has truly been inspirational. I've truly enjoyed my time with you, but I want you to leave us with an inspirational message, something that we can take home with us that will inspire us.
Wow. I guess I would say that there's a poem by Rudyard Kipling entitled If, my favorite poem. It begins this way. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. And there's several stanzas in between, and it ends this way. And what is more, you will be a man, my son. Rudyard obviously writing this piece of poetry for his son. And that's what I want to leave with your podcast participants, that you're going to take a lot of stuff tonight. and listen closely. Many things might be personal, but many things are not personal. People might be disagreeing with your point of view, but they aren't disagreeing with you because they don't know you that well.
Right.
People may not be holding the door for you, basing all kinds of results of what you may look like. But as long as you know who you are and feel who you are, and most of all, love who you are, the next day will be a day of joy, a day of celebration, and hopefully you can bring someone else along to help celebrate with you.
Well, Peter, I want to thank you for joining us on the show today. I do want to one more time mention your book. It's called A Black First by Peter E. Carter. And you can get it on Amazon, I believe, Amazon.com. Yep, there it is, A Black First. Peter is now an author. And you know what I tell people after they write a book? Now you can put 3 letters at the end of the word author that everybody's trying to earn. That's ITY. When you put author when you put ITY at the end of author, you become an authority. So you just learned your 3 letters, your ITY, now that you've written that book.
I don't think so. But, okay, so it's about me, so I'm not an authority on anything. I didn't write about a third. I did not write about Plato. I just wrote about me.
That's all right.
Thank you so much, sir.
But you're an author on life and experience. So everything you told us today, you can only learn that through experience. So Peter, again, and as I say to all of my guests for coming on the show, you have gone beyond the culture. And I thank you for joining us.
My pleasure again, Doctor.
All right. And you take care. Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, please go to our website at www.beyondtheculturepodcast.com, or you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. On the website, you can subscribe to the show and connect with me by leaving your email address. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.